Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It is Macro Talk 12/2/25. That's December the 2nd, by the way, and I am sick as a dog. I have the cold, I believe. Came on all of a sudden last night, and I feel wretched. If I start coughing, I'll have to stop doing this because I won't be able to continue. But anyway, as long as my voice holds out, tonight I'm going to get caught up on as many of your questions as I possibly can. So if you have a macro related question, please put it in the chat and direct it to me. If we run out of questions in the chat, I'm going to dip into my vat of unanswered questions, which is quite large. We won't get to finish all of them, but I have plenty of interesting ones that have been asked. The November contest is over. It finished Sunday night, and it was a record showing with a ton of really excellent entries. My friend and world-class macro photographer Stuart Wood and I completed the judging and the video today, but I didn't get to edit it because I didn't feel like it, didn't feel well enough to. So as soon as I can, I will get it posted, hopefully in the next day or two. And you'll be able to see who won. You'll enjoy their photographs and be able to congratulate them. I'll congratulate the winners now, even though I can't say who they are. It was a real bumper entry month. I was not expecting 50 entries, but there you go. We got them. The December contest is already underway. It's the annual end of the year December wildcard competition that we've done for several years now. Everybody can enter 2 images in this one, which is different than usual. That includes the former winners. So anybody who enters can enter 2 images. And there are going to be some prizes, and they're going to be awarded in 2 categories. There'll be a prize for the best picture in the former winners category, which is everybody who's won in the last 5 years. They will be in one category. Everybody else will be in the other. Now, this month, last month, November, the competition, we not only had the record number of entries, but we had the record number of disqualifications because there were a whole bunch of entries that didn't have the naming convention followed. So I didn't know what the name of the picture was or who had submitted it. If you don't do that, I won't know who submits it, and I have to disqualify them. So, it's really important that you follow that convention. There are instructions for how to do it on the Walls app and on my website under competition. If you go there, just follow what it says and you'll be good. Now, there is going to be an exception in December. One exception. I want to cover it here just so that word will get out. If you are a former winner, that means you won my macro photography competition at any time in the last 5 years. What you need to do is, after your name in the naming convention for your entry, put a _ winner right before the .jpg. Okay, so after your name, before the file name, the file type, put .winner. That way I'll know you're in that winning category and I can split you out. That will be that'll save me a lot of time. So thank you for that. And that's about everything I had. This Thursday, 2 o'clock, Macro Talk 2, I'm going to do a summary of all the new stuff that's going on in macro lighting. We're going to be talking about new flash gear, the latest LED technology, novel techniques in the studio and in the field. And we're going to take a comprehensive look at everything new in macro lighting. 2 o'clock on Thursday. Saturday, 10 o'clock in the morning until noon per Zoom. It's a twice monthly get-together where I get face-to-face with my Patreon supporters and we talk about everything macro photography. I've always loved this 4 hours a month that we do in total. And they're always enjoyable gatherings, but they have been getting really good lately with lots and lots of member input, talking about macro rig improvements, new equipment reviews, and all kinds of things, technical challenges or project updates. It's a lot of fun, and it's getting better and better. So if you are a Patreon supporter, thank you first, and I'll see you on Saturday. If you are not, please consider going over to Patreon, www.patreon.com/AlanWallsPhotography, and look into the possibility of joining the group. We'd love to have you. Next Friday at 2 o'clock is Crystal Art. Harold Hall and I will lead a discussion about everything to do with birefringent photography, taking pictures of pretty crystals and learning how to grow them. It's free and you are welcome. So let's dive in. Let me see. If you have a question, all you have to do is address it to me in the chat, and they're the first things I will look at. I'm not gonna have anybody go through these and sort them out for me, because it'll be easier for me to just do them this way. What is your favorite fungus recipe, and what is your favorite insect recipe? This is from Joseph, of course, and I'd have to think about that. My favorite fungus recipe tonight would have to be mushroom soup, because I'm in need of soup before bed. Favorite insect recipe? I don't eat many insects, so I really don't have one. But there you go. Let me see. Amy is here, Chief of the Bouncers. Hey, Amy. Hey, Diane. Good to see you. And Ian is here from the UK. You are from the UK, Ian, right? It's late over there. What are you doing up at this hour? You'll be sleepy tomorrow. Let me see who else is here. Robert is here from Florida. Greetings, Robert. And Harold. Awesome. From one of those Idaho type states. Good to have you here, sir. Alrighty, I don't think I missed anybody, and there are no questions as of yet. So while you're thinking of them, I'm going to go through the ones that I've accumulated over the last few months. These are questions that come in through Patreon, through the Walls app, through my website, in response to blog posts. There's all kinds of places these questions come in, and I don't get to always answer them. I usually do. But when I don't, they go in the pot, and they are for this particular kind of live stream. So somebody asked, what's the easiest way to improve macro photographs without having to buy any new gear? Typical kind of question that I love to answer, because I'm always looking for ways to do things better with less investment in gear. Probably the two things that you can do that will make the biggest difference in the quality of your macro shots will be paying more attention to the angle of your lighting and the quality of your lighting, but more so the angle. You can really make an image pop just by moving the lighting off axis with the camera, allowing some shadows and some contrast to develop. The other thing is making sure your subject is stable, whether it be an insect or a flower or a leaf for that matter, anything at all. Make sure it's not moving. If it's moving and you're trying to do a focus stack, you're going to end up with problems. If it's moving fast, you're going to end up with blur in the image. So probably the easiest way, without having to buy a new lens, without having to do anything else fancy, just pay attention to the direction of your lighting and making sure your subject is stable. And you can change the direction of your lighting without actually doing much other than putting a white card off to one side of the subject and bouncing some extra light back in. It's very, very simple to do and make a big difference. All right. When is... I'm not sure I completely understood this question, so I'm paraphrasing. When should I use extension tubes instead of a diopter? That's an interesting question. Is when do you want to magnify your subject with a diopter, which is a filter that goes on the front of the lens and magnifies the subject, or when do you want to actually extend the lens away from the camera and add magnification that way? Well, I would say use extension tubes whenever you want to add magnification without adding glass, without adding anything that may interfere with the performance of the lens, which would be true if you were using a macro lens, because you aren't going to improve it with a diopter. It would also be true if you were using short primes, 35 to 50 millimeter prime lenses. Adding a diopter to those would also probably not improve the photograph. When you want to get magnification without losing light, however, then you'd be better off using a diopter, because when you use extension tubes, you are going to lose light because of the added distance. So when you're working with longer lenses, like lenses over 105, say 100 millimeters, there's no real advantage to adding extension to those lenses. That's why we normally use diopters with longer focal length lenses, and we use extension with shorter focal length lenses. So high quality close-up lenses or like Raynox lenses can be incredibly sharp and don't really add much interference from the glass. So bear that in mind. Okay, let me see. Are you going to play us a tune? Asks Amy. I was playing myself a tune just this afternoon, actually, Amy. I haven't picked up a guitar in weeks, and yeah, I thought I'd give it a try, but I couldn't hear it because of my cold, so it's probably good. And Ian lives in Canada, yeah, but he is an expat, as am I. Okay, join the club. All right, perfect. And moving on. How do I avoid scaring insects away when in the field? Well, it's one of those questions I don't really think about very much because I do it automatically. But how do you stop insects from getting creeped out? One of my favorite ways is to become part of the landscape. This is a bit extreme, but when I'm photographing active insects during the day, I like to actually get into the cover. For example, if I'm shooting a bush with flowers on it, I like to actually get inside the bush and point my camera out. And that way, after a while, the bees don't pay any attention to you. None of the insects do. They just think you're a particularly ugly protuberance from the plant, and they ignore you. They crawl all over you. It's a great way to do it. But if you're going to be more like a normal person, then the idea is to be very slow and measured in your movement. No sudden movements. Don't let your shadow or the shadow of your camera fall on the insect, because that means they're going to see a dark area and they're going to freak out. So no sudden lateral movements. Just move ever so gradually towards your subject. And shooting early in the morning or late in the evening are good if you can find the subjects, because generally speaking, they're cooling off in the evening or they're already cold in the morning, and they aren't going to be nearly as easy to freak out. So, of course, having a longer focal length lens is one of the best ways to do it. But remember, if you're used to shooting a 90 millimeter Tamron, say, and you get a 200 millimeter Nikon, you're only actually getting an additional 12 inches or so of working space, which is actually more than enough for even the most skittish insects. It doesn't seem like much, but it really is a long way. So they're the main things. Don't throw a shadow on the bug. Don't do sudden movements. If you can do it, become part of the scenery, and breathe normally. Don't talk. Don't talk on the cell phone, or don't shout at your friend who's hiding in another bush. No voices. And yeah, because insects will pick up on vibrations. Would you excuse me for a second? All right. I'm not actually going to blow my nose because it's a revolting thing, and I wouldn't do that to you. Let me see. Thank you, Diane. We have a #1 fan. What do you call these things? Super chats. Thank you so much, Diane. I will go buy some cough medicine this evening with that. All right, I'm getting, excuse me, I'm trying to not cough, because if I start, I won't be able to stop. All right. Why do my focus stacked images show halos around the edges? All right, what causes halos? What are halos all about? There are a couple of culprits. One of them is movement between frames. If you have any movement at all, and you're doing a focus stack, you're going to take photographs of the part of the insect or part of the flower that's moving. So you'll have pictures of it here and here and here and here, and it will leave behind a ghost of the image. It won't be as strong as the part of the image that is photographed more in the stack when it comes to rest, but it'll show the movement leading up to it. The other thing is misalignment, and especially when it's caused by focus breathing. Focus breathing is when you're using a lens's focusing mechanism, and in the process of focusing on different parts of the subject enlarges or shrinks depending on the position of the helicoid in your lens. So if frame to frame the subject is getting larger or smaller, then at some point you're going to be photographing a blurred out foreground in front of a sharp background, and that will leave a rim of halo. So by reducing the step size, and stabilizing the subject, and or using a rail instead of the helicoid, you're going to reduce a lot of that halo. Now, some of the halo is caused by the focus stacking process, and there's a question coming up later that addresses that, and we'll talk about that separately. But from a mechanical standpoint, make sure that you're aligned properly and that you have no movement of the subject or the camera, and you'll get rid of most of it. Okay, is there a perfect magnification for photographing crystals, seeds, or small textures? No, there is not, which makes sense because they're all going to be different sizes. The right magnification is the one that reveals the structure without overwhelming the viewer, without making the thing unreadable. Basically, 2 to 5 times magnification is the sweet spot for most little seeds. Most of the really ornamental seeds that I like to photograph, between 5x and maybe 8x. But if you have really fine structure, you can go higher than that. But yeah, that's there's no such thing as a stupid question. That one was close. That one was close to being difficult. So let me see. Let's see if there are any in the chat. Is Nikon about to release a series of new Nikon cameras? Art, I don't know. Nikon, generally speaking, doesn't speak to me about upcoming releases. They don't speak to me about anything. What am I talking about? So I don't know. I've heard rumors. That there will be some new cameras coming out, entirely new. So, but we'll see. I hear that kind of rumor all the time. If you hear about it before I do, let me know, please. All right, let me see. Art's sources say 3 cameras: a mechanical, a high-res, and a Z7 Mark III. Okay, so they're not really new cameras. It's not a new camera line. It's just an addition to the fleet. That would make more sense, and I would not be the least surprised if they did that. Certainly, it's overdue that we had the Z7 Mark III. I wonder if it's going to have a global shutter. Probably not. What's the biggest mistake beginners make with their lighting in macro photography? Well, it's hard to say because there are a lot of mistakes made in lighting. It's the most important part of macro photography, and it's the least well understood part, and it's the part that takes the most practice. But usually the light that is chosen by a beginner is too small, and it is positioned too close to the optical axis. So if your camera is here and your subject is here, if you have the light attached to the top of the camera, it is almost on the optical axis. And using a small, bright light on the optical axis will almost guarantee you have ugly specularity and a very flat and unflattering picture. So using a light source that is large yet dimmer, so you get a more of a flooding effect, and off axis of the camera, so that the light is coming from 45 degrees or above across the subject, will give you all kinds of depth. You can always add another light on the other side to fill in any dark shadows. But that's the biggest mistake, and where it ties back to that first question, it's probably the biggest bang for your buck. If you're dissatisfied with your macro photography or with the final images, look first at your lighting setup. What kind of lights are you using? How large are they? How well diffused are they? And what is the direction you're lighting from? Because it is so easy to fall into the trap of trying to get the light in the direction you're pointing the camera. You know, they make speed lights that fit onto the top of your camera and point right down the optical axis, which is not good for anything, by the way, even photographing people or whatever it is you're using it for. But it does make you think that that's where the flash belongs. It really doesn't, not for what we do anyway. Okay. Diffusion. Forgetting to use diffusion or not using diffusion is probably the other part of that lighting thing, by the way. You can use a sheet of cheap printer paper, a piece of tracing paper or vellum, a piece of white fabric. It doesn't really matter what you use. Well, it does matter, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I mean, if you're not using any diffusion, then it doesn't matter what you use because it's going to be better. But something to soften and scatter the light. The goal in macro photography should almost always be to have a light that is so diffuse, that is so large, that the subject, be it a dead insect or a flower, if it were able to look at the light, it wouldn't see a light source. It would see a whole field of light coming at it. That's what you want. If you start to think like the subject on the end of the pin, probably not a healthy thing to do for too much of the time, but if you imagine what that would be like, your goal would be to have a broad, soft, large light that you couldn't put a finger on where the actual filament of the light was. It's somewhere in there, but the whole thing is light. If that's what your subject is seeing, then you're going to get a pleasing photograph from that, because it will give you definition and shadow, but it won't give you specular highlights and jaggedy bits in the photograph, which you don't want. Is a telephoto use of any lens, a telephoto lens of any use for macro work? Absolutely. Absolutely. I love using telephoto lenses for macro, providing you're using a camera with a good sensor and it's a good lens so that you can crop in. But I use, not infrequently, a 200mm prime lens as a macro lens. Now, I have a 200mm macro lens, which has a relatively short working distance, but I have a regular telephoto lens, 200mm, and it is fantastic for all kinds of things that I like to photograph that either I don't want to get that close to or I can't get that close to. Frogs and lizards and snakes and other interesting subjects that are a little bit further away. uh, I have a good 200mm lens that takes very sharp pictures, and it's wonderful for that kind of photography. You just need to be aware of the fact that you're going to crop it in. It does have a tendency to flatten the image somewhat, which sometimes is a good thing, but they do compress the background and make for some nice out of focus background. So certainly, I think the problem with the 200mm lens, and the reason I don't use it more often than I do, is it weighs about as much as all of my other lenses together. So if I'm going out with my bag of tricks and I have a couple of camera bodies and usually a couple of macro lenses, maybe a wide angle macro or a shorter focal length one, but I've got a bag full of stuff, including lights, and then I need room to put this 200mm lens in, it's not going to go. Something else has to come out, so I usually end up leaving it, but it's definitely worth having. All right. Here's another one that I don't really understand. Oh, I guess I do understand it. Is how do I know whether a subject will look better shot vertically or horizontally? I'm guessing you mean camera angle. That's probably what you're talking about. Well, it comes down to the subject and the sense of flow you get from looking at the subject. For example, if you have the crane fly image that I have at the beginning of this in my live stream slides is a vertical orientation because the crane fly has a very long face. Its flow is vertical. It would not look good if it was competing with a wide horizontal frame. Would you excuse me? I'm not going to make it through the hour without blowing my nose. I'm sorry, but anyhow, if you have something that is round or something that has lateral movement, for example, an insect crawling across a leaf, that would be something you would absolutely want to shoot in the horizontal orientation. And part of the reason is you need to give your subject room to move. Now, obviously, it's a still photograph, so your subject isn't actually moving. But if you have an insect that is walking forwards or walking towards the camera, but slightly to the right, you need to provide a little space for the insect to walk into, because our human brains will look at that, and if we see that the frame is boxing the insect in, it doesn't have room to move, and we won't like that. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look normal. We want space for the thing to move in. Just like if you're shooting a bird that's flying, you want to give a little more room the direction it's flying in. And this is true even for things that don't move. If you have a flower that has a pretty piece that comes out horizontally, what do they call those things? I can't remember. There's a kind of flower that they had at my botanical gardens that had a spiky thing that came out the side, very colourful. But I always would shoot that in a horizontal orientation because it flows in that direction. It just looks right. It wouldn't look right in a vertical. So basically, give your subjects room to breathe, room to move, and room to expand. If they seem to be going in a particular direction, give them room to continue doing that. All right, let me see. Question. Could you do a review for the Nikon Z8 II? I didn't know there was a Nikon Z8 II, but yes, I most certainly will. I'll have to figure out how to do that. Maybe maybe I can do a rental and get the camera for a week or so. And yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good question and something I'll be happy to do. Can someone suggest a good battery for running a rail in the field? Which rail are you using? There are batteries that are designed specifically for that purpose. If you're using a stack shot, I know that Cognosys makes a battery pack that I believe, don't hold me to this, but I believe it's powered by four, I think it's four 18650 batteries, which will power the thing for a good day's shooting. It has all the proprietary connectors that you need for it to operate properly with the stack shot. Be very careful. I would be very cautious about just hooking up any power supply to run your device. They have some very sensitive electronics in them, and they may not be able to deal with a power mismatch. So I would certainly say that your best bet would be to go to the device maker. Go to StackShot or go to Cognisys, I should say. Go to Cognisys or go to WeMacro. They also have a field battery pack, as does I think they all do. I'm trying to remember whether or not the gosh, I'm forgetting the name of the company out of is it Germany? NJKZZ. That's what I was trying to say. I know that they have a battery system as well for some of their rails, but not for all of them. I would have to check and see, but your best bet is to go with the actual manufacturer first, and if they don't, then we could talk about workarounds of how you could use other things, but don't just hook up any battery pack. Any suggestions for macro photography for a bunny, domesticated, not wild, about 4 pounds or 1.8 kilograms? No. None whatsoever, Joseph. Thanks for asking, though. It's a WeMacro rail, says David. And let me see. Does WeMacro have a battery pack? You know, because of the internet and how wonderful it is, I may be able to actually check that out while we're talking. Wouldn't that be helpful? Let me see. I'm pretty sure that Novaflex has one as well, but I can't remember seeing it. Let me see if WeMacro ought to have one. I'm pretty sure I've seen it. I just don't know. Where in their catalog it would be. Probably in their field equipment. Let me have a quick look there, and I can tell you how much it costs. Yeah, they have. No, it doesn't look like they do. They've added a lot of stuff. WeMacro has added a lot of different adapters for all kinds of cameras. That's very impressive. I'm going to look at one other place under field equipment and see if they have. They do. No, they don't. They do. A battery box for $29. There you go. You need a power bank cable for the controller, which is $9. So say for $40, you got the whole thing. There you go. So that's definitely the way I would go, David. Don't try to make one. Don't try to buy a third-party one. Just use the one that WeMacro makes, and they make good stuff. So I think you'll be very happy with it. How much does it cost to rent a camera for the week? I don't know. Should I look that up as well? It is fun to watch people use the internet on the internet. Doubtful. Let me see. Camera rental. How much does it cost to rent a camera? Let me see. Okay, $1,309 for 7 days. That's for some kind of video camera, though. Let me see. Here you go. So I'll pick a nice camera like the A7 IV is $145 for a week. 190 for another one, another Sony one. 202 for the A7R5. Gets expensive, doesn't it? Nikon Z8, 236 for 7 days. So now you know. But that's not the two. I'm sure that'll be more expensive. So I'm guessing 250. There you go. Answered that question too. And Mike Olson reported a $29 battery pack that's on sale now. Before I did, excellent. And there you go. So they're out there, and they're not that expensive. You could buy something like 4 battery packs, or you could rent a Nikon Z8 for a week. Your choice. All right. What's the advantage of using microscope objectives? I actually get asked this one a lot. Why do I have to go out on a limb and try something new like a microscope objective? Why can't I just add more extension to my lenses? I'll tell you why. It's because of the way that the lens is constructed, and the fact that it gives you true high magnification. It's basically, they're difficult to use because they have to be perfectly aligned. They have to be set up at the correct distances for finite lenses, or with the correct tube lenses if they are infinitely conjugate. So they are tricky to use, but when you get them aligned properly, and you get them with the right distances and the right tube lens, what you're going to have is unrivaled sharpness because of the numeric aperture of the lens. I'm going to get into some real specifics in a couple of the later questions about numeric aperture and magnification, but you just can't keep moving a lens away from the objective. Sorry, a lens away from the sensor. I'm losing track of my words because there's a drop getting ready to fall out of my head. There we are. So you can't just keep moving the lens away from the camera, because as you do, yes, your magnification goes up. But after a while, you've moved the aperture so far away from the sensor that diffraction causes so much softening, you might as well not bother. And that is why there are limits to how much magnification you can get from a camera lens. Camera lenses are not designed to give you that kind of magnification. Microscope objectives are designed for that very purpose. So the reason is, once you get above 3 or 4x, even if you have a camera with a lens that is supposedly designed to shoot up to 5x, you need to think about what kind of working aperture you have at that magnification, and compare it to what you will get from a fairly high numeric aperture objective. And you'll see exactly why it's a better deal. All right. If you only want to buy one lens for macro and general photography, so if you're not completely sure you want to dip your foot into the macro pond, what would be your best choice of lenses? Say you are buying a used lens. All day long, it would be a 90 to 105 millimeter macro lens, which is a very common size. That is because it's a great macro lens that gives you plenty of working distance for almost anything you're likely to do within the field. But it's also a stupendous lens for doing portraits. In fact, doing just about any general photography. I will use my 90mm Tamron for just about everything that I need a 90mm lens for. It's just a very safe lens focal length. If you get a really short focal length like a 55mm, which is the Nikon, for example, is a wonderful macro lens, it's not much good for other things. It doesn't make a very good walking around 50mm lens, for example, but the 90 is great. It's great for portraits, and I love it. It's probably the single most versatile lens you can have. Is a good around 100mm macro lens. All right. I get asked this question probably more than any other, is how do I pick the right step length for my macro photography if I'm doing focus stacking? People who are new to focus stacking make one of several mistakes. They overcomplicate it. They don't use a calculator, and they don't have a feel for what is approximately the correct either number of steps or step length. Now, if we're talking about magnification, if we're talking about anything that uses a microscope objective, which we often will be, if we're talking about macro and focus stacking, we're probably using a microscope objective or an extended lens. So the key is the numeric aperture that we've talked about before, not the magnification per se, though that can have a lot to do with it. But as a general rule of thumb, your step size needs to be two times the pixel size of your sensor, which you can look up, divided by the numeric aperture squared. And that's all you need to remember. And you don't even have to remember that if you know how to find one of the calculators online, like Rick's calculator over on Zerine. That's a wonderful calculator. And for high magnification, really all you need to know is the numeric aperture. But the other thing you need to know is what is roughly right, what is approximately correct, so that if you do a calculation and discover that you need 450,000 steps to photograph this grasshopper, your step length is probably a bit shorter than it needs to be, or in that case, a lot shorter than it needs to be. So having a ballpark idea in your head of what a good conservative step length is, and then just checking it to make sure that, well, my subject is 5mm thick, that should be 200 steps. But if your calculation shows it's 2,000 steps, you've got an order of magnitude error, and you can pick up on that. Excuse me. Oh dear. All right, so what are those ballpark numbers? If you think of one-to-one photography and think of an ideal step size, it's probably somewhere between 0.1 and 0.2 millimeters. That's 100 and 200 microns. If your calculator is telling you it's way more or way less than that, you're probably making a mistake in the calculation. So at 1x, conservatively, honestly, 500 microns or half a millimeter might be enough to get you through at 1x. At 5x, somewhere between 10 and 20 microns per step. And at 10x, somewhere between 4 and 10, 5 and 10. And at 20x, if you're interested, it's around 2, 1 to 3. So if you're thinking in those terms, and they're the only numbers you have to remember, then it'll help you make a good choice. When in doubt, choose the smaller steps, slightly smaller, because the smaller the steps, it doesn't, strictly speaking, reduce artifact, but it gives you more options for retouching, and it does make for a smoother photograph. So yeah, small steps, but don't overdo it. All right, let me see. Any other questions here? Okay, Joseph's thinking about photographing Mr. Spot's paws. Paws as in rabbit hands. And he's hasn't had a nail trim since I've had him, which has only been 2 weeks. His eyes are interesting, but his ears are too obvious. Well, yeah, these things need to be figured out. As soon as you decide what you want to photograph, I'll help you set that shot up. Otitis media and potential ruptured eardrum sucks. Also very painful. But if you folks don't like it, I'll ask Alan to play Sweet Thang. I'll tell you what, I might just play Sweet Thang next time. I do have it still, so be careful. 10 likes. I'm not surprised. I'm actually very surprised I got any likes tonight, because I must be making you feel miserable with this snotty head of mine. Anyway, let me see. 10% of the equipment price per month for a commercial lease of 2 months. 10% of the equipment rental price per week for a short-term rental, 2 weeks or less. Well, that's the answer to the question, and that seems obscenely high. Yeah, that does seem obscenely high. All right, I think we're caught up on all those questions. You're doing phenomenal yeoman service considering you're under the weather. Thank you so much. I do feel under the weather, as is probably quite obvious. What is the difference between a tube lens and extension when using microscope objectives? Okay, this confuses some people. You'll have a microscope objective and you'll hear somebody say, oh, that needs a tube length of 150 millimeters. And then you'll hear another microscope objective and somebody will say, oh, well, you need a tube lens of this type or that type. It's the difference between the type of lens it is. An older finite microscope objective does not use a tube lens. It doesn't operate in the same way the infinity corrected one does. All it needs is the correct distance from the objective to the sensor. That is not something you have to calculate. You simply look at it on the side of your objective. It will be printed. It'll be a 3-digit number, usually 160 for the objectives we mostly use. That is the distance between the objective and the end of the microscope tube. But you have to bear in mind that excludes the 10 millimeters that the eyepiece takes up. So you have to take the 10 millimeters off, leaving you a tube length between your sensor and the objective of 150 millimeters. That's all you really have to remember about that. But if instead of having a 3-digit number on the barrel of the objective, there is an infinity sign, a sideways 8, then that will tell you it's infinity conjugate and you need a tube lens. And the focal length of that tube lens will vary with the brand of the microscope objective. That's the difference between the two. Look for the infinity sign. If you see it anywhere on the objective, it means you need a tube lens. Okay. This is a good question. Why do some of my macro photos look flat, even though the subject is interesting? Well, again, we go back to the first question that was asked. The most important part of making a macro subject look interesting is the way you light it. And if your lighting is axial and uniform, it's usually going to lead to a flat, boring image. And I don't mean flat as in boring. I mean flat having no sense of depth to it. There are cues that we get from shadows that fall on things that tell us, oh, that's protruding because of the way the shadow forms behind it. If your light is coming from straight on, those shadows disappear and you have no way of judging whether something is actually three-dimensional or not, and it looks therefore flat. So pulling your light off axis, taking it away from the direction of the lens, putting the lights out to the side a little bit, it's all you have to do to create the three-dimensional sense, and it helps greatly to have one light brighter than the other or nearer than the other so that you get a light side and a dark side. But I think we've beaten that one to death. Do I have to get a tripod for macro photography? Well, yes, you do. If you're planning on doing any field macro, I don't use a tripod in the studio for macro that very often. I mean, maybe for I use a camera stand for some of my product stuff, but most of the time you won't. You'll either use a rail, which will be on a platform, a tabletop thing, or that will be most of your photography. But having a tripod in the field is absolutely necessary. Even though our cameras these days are capable of doing amazing things with low light and incredibly fast shutter speeds, and the lighting and everything else that we have makes it possible to get away with handheld macro a lot of the time. If you want to have your absolute best shots, then I think it's worth having a lightweight tripod in your backpack as a way to really control any kind of camera movement for a really important shot. So yes, sometimes, not always, but yeah, having one, recognizing that you might not take it out of the backpack your whole trip, is still a better bet. It will help. Okay, what are the biggest benefits of shooting macro with a mirrorless camera? I used to have a not particularly. Would you excuse me? Oh dear. All right. I used to have a lot of excuses, a lot of reasons why I didn't need a mirrorless camera. It wouldn't add anything to my photography, and that was simply because I couldn't afford to buy a mirrorless camera, so I didn't want to think about it. But now a lot of people will ask, what are the benefits of a mirrorless camera? And I can be honest in saying that with a mirrorless camera, you've got a live view that can be magnified. So you've got real-time magnified live view. You've got focus peaking, which of course you may have had with your mirrored camera, but you have silent shutter. And oftentimes that alone for a macro photographer is reason enough to get one. It has revolutionized my studio photography. I used to think I would never switch from the D850 or the D7500 Nikons for my in-studio macro stacking. I will never stack with one of them again. I don't have the patience anymore to wait for that mirror to flap up and the vibrations to stop. I can shoot as fast as the light will let me with the mirrorless camera. So there are a lot of reasons for doing it, but having no mirror shock for focus stacking is probably the very best reason. And there are others as well, but just for the macro photographer, just one time set up a stack for a mirrored camera and then do the same for a mirrorless, and that's all you need to worry about. Okay. Why do my colors warm when I shoot through heavy diffusion? Well, I'm guessing that what you're using a diffusion that has color. I mean, most diffusion does add a little bit of color, even if it's very, very slight. But the heavier the diffusion gets, and if like me, you use multiple layers, you have to be very, very careful that what you're shooting through is not carrying a color cast of its own. I use a plastic film, a cloudy plastic film that is beautiful because it stays very white, but it's resistant to fading and yellowing over time, and it doesn't tear, and a bunch of other properties. But I have noticed that the beginning of the roll of material, it is a tiny bit yellowed, and that tiny bit of yellow will cast a warmish cast over the image. And it's a simple fix is to use a custom white balance to get rid of it. But it's worth paying attention to that some materials more than others will yellow over time. So if you've got a roll of diffusion material that's 150 years old, you might want to double check it. Okay. I'm going to skip a couple of these because we've really covered that stuff. But I'm going to ask a couple of couple of real teasers. Some of these are questions I had to look the answers up for because I wasn't quite sure. This one, for example, why does turning your diffusion inside out make the image sharper? Well, my first reaction to that was, well, it doesn't. But when I found out what the diffuser was that was being used, it was one of these neoprene, soft, rubbery type things that fits on your flash, and it has two surfaces. It has an outside smooth surface, which is what the light comes through last, and it's kind of shiny on the outside, but on the inside it's got a rough texture to it. And the thing is that when you're using the smooth diffusion, or you're using the thing the way it's meant to be used, the shadows are a bit softer and contrast is a little bit reduced because of that. I would never have guessed this, but actually when you turn that thing inside out and you use the rougher edge towards the subject, you get a little bit more scattered light, but it's a little more directional, and you get edge contrast where you didn't with the smoother diffusion, and it actually does make the image look a tiny bit sharper. So yeah, go figure. I mean, technically speaking, you'd think the light source would be more diffused and larger if it was going through the rough surface last. But yeah, it's counterintuitive, but it's real. It does add to the edge contrast. So now you know. What determines we've got 4 minutes left. What determines the true resolution limit at 10 times magnification? Is it pixel size or numeric aperture? What do you say? Raise your hand if you think it's pixel size. Raise your hand if you think it's numeric aperture. Correct answer, numeric aperture. Yeah. Once you get up to high enough magnification, the lens only out resolves the sensor if the numeric aperture permits it. In other words, it's kind of the limiting step. The pixel size matters only if the sensor is so low resolution, so coarse, that it can't sample the detail that the objective is making. So in practice, numeric aperture is the governor, which is why we use it in calculations. It is the defining factor of an objective. How sharply does, or how well does the objective resolve detail in an image? Look at the numeric aperture. The higher it is, the more resolving power it has. All right. Here's a good one. When does increasing magnification actually decrease the amount of visible detail in your photograph? I like this one because it's also about the numeric aperture. It's when your magnification gets ahead of the numeric aperture. If the NA is low, so if you have an inexpensive, a cheap objective with a low NA, all you do when you enlarge the image through that objective, which is high magnification but low NA, is you magnify the blur. You enlarge the blur. You don't get more fine detail. It's what's called empty magnification. If you've ever heard that term, it's where you can make the image bigger, but you're not making the resolution any better. So what you actually end up doing is making the picture look worse because you're limited by the numeric aperture. Does that make sense? It's an important question. Knowing what empty magnification means will keep you out of a lot of trouble. I think with 1 minute to go and my nose so desperately needing to be blown, I'm going to say goodbye and call it there. We didn't get to all of my questions, but that's okay. We've got plenty of time. We'll get to them later on. All right, let me see. What is the new miracle aperture you get? numerical aperture. Yeah, okay, I got that through my blurry head. I did understand that. Okay, guys, I'm gonna go crash, I think. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for putting up with me tonight. Hopefully I will be fully on the mend by Thursday, but I will see you then, and hope you can make it. We're going to be getting into light in some detail. So thank you all for coming, and have a great evening. See you again soon. Good night.